Namaskar. Welcome to this session. We are considering the Pranayam Sutra or Pranayam Anga of Ashtanga Yoga. And what Patanjali or the tradition of yoga is mentioning is Pranayam and not Shvasayam. However, it is through Shvasa, Shvasanam, Shvasa Prashvasa, Shvasochvasa, the Pranayam takes place. So, Shvasa is vehicle of Pranayam. But what is being mentioned is Pranayam and not Shvasayam. This must be understood in the light of the idea of Pranayam today. Because today the idea of Pranayam is something to do with the breath, and that's called breath regulation. And what is regulated? Volume, velocity of the breath. Usually deep breathing is considered as Pranayam. Layman thinks that the breath must be deep, then it is Pranayam, or breath must be slow and deep, and it is Pranayam. So either it should be deep or it should be slow and deep. That means it also means that it means sharp and deep, normal and deep, and slow and deep. So there is high velocity and deep breathing, normal velocity and deep breathing, low velocity and deep breathing. So it is just handling the breath, and that is why we are familiar with the concept of deep breathing or breath control and breath regulation. But then that would be Shvasayam. But what Patanjali is mentioning is Pranayam. And that is why we will be looking into the sutras, so that we will be getting substantiation of this stand. So we should not be equating the Prana and Shvaasa, but we should know the relationship between Prana and Shvaasa. They are not one and the same, but they are so closely related that one tends to equate them. One of the mystic poet has described here in following words: the cuckoo and crow both look similar and both are black. But therefore you cannot equate the sound that the cuckoo bird produces and the sound that the crow produces. And the distinctive factor is the sound of the two birds, which keep the two birds absolutely distinct. So he says prana is something like cuckoo and the breathing is something like crow, and therefore there should be no equation. Anyway, coming to Patanjali's concept of pranayam, we will note that Patanjali is meaning the circumscription of countless nadis, the nadi network in the body, in the embodiment, which is on astronomical scale. There are billions and billions of naadis, which the mapping of body in exoteric sciences finds no place. And these nadis need purification. So, pranayam is something which is going to purify the nadis. The shvasa doesn't do it. The crow doesn't do it, but the cuckoo does it, as described by a mystic poet. When the nadis are purified, the Vasana kosha is set right, put in order, put in shape, and then also cultured. Then the pranayam works on Shatchakras. Then it works on the Granthitraya, which is described in exoteric physiology, esoteric anatomy and physiology that comes in Yoga Shastra. Vishnu Granthi, Brahma Granthi, Rudra Granthi. These are Vasana loci. So they are purified, sublimated for spiritual evolvement. Shatchakras are Vasana loci again, because there is body of Mooladhar Vasana, Swadhisthana Vasana, Madhipuraka Vasana, Anahata Vasana, Vishuddhi Vasana, Agnya Vasana. And we had discussed while we had devoted certain sessions on Shatchakras. So I will not once again go into it. One should refer to those sessions which were dedicated to Shatchakras. Then the Panchamahabhutas in the embodiment are also loci of Vasanas. And these things are addressed in Pranayam and not in Shvasayam. So all kinds of Vasanas, Vishaya Vasana, Karma Vasana, Papa Vasana, Deha Vasana, Indriya Vasana. This concept of Vasana is delineated in science of yoga and philosophy of yoga. Patanjali therefore speaks of something that is called as Chitta Parikarma, Chitta Satviki Karanam, Chitta Brahmi Karanam, and all this is by Pranakriya and Pranayam. Nothing else can work there. And therefore Pranayam gets what can be called as Ananya Sadharana Mahatvam. Unique importance comes to Pranayam because it can do what nothing else can do. No other sadhana can do. Therefore, in Jnana Sadhana, Jnana Marga, Jnana Yoga, there is Pranayam. In Karma Sadhana, Karma Marga, Karma Yoga, there is Pranayam. In Dhyana Sadhana, Dhyana Marga, Dhyana Yoga, there is Pranayam. And in Bhakti, Bhakti Sadhana, Bhakti Marga, Bhakti Yoga, there is Pranayam. Pranayam would come in all spiritual pursuits because nothing else can purify the Chitta, Vasana Shuddhi, Atma Shuddhi, Chitta Shuddhi, Buddhi Shuddhi. It is a monopoly of Pranayam. So that is something that should be noted, and the Shvasayam won't do it. And therefore, traditionally, there is mention of Samantrak Pranayam and Amantrak Pranayam, to which a reference was already made. Samantrak Pranayam is there is a mantra. There is a soundtrack of mantra, silent soundtrack of mantra, mental soundtrack of mantra, or Madhyama soundtrack of mantra for pranayam. And the mantras are various kinds of mantras that you get in Mantra Shastra. Ekakshara Bija mantra to Mala mantra. Long mantras. So, we are familiar with the concept of Samantrak Pranayam, where mantra comes in pranayam. Some or the other mantra would be silently chanted, mentally chanted, and pranayam would be done. But when it is amantrak pranayam, it doesn't refer to shvasayam. It is again pranayam. But when it is amantraka, it is taking recourse to swaravarana vyanjana nama shabda. So, taking recourse to the literal sound forms of primordial language or nama, as mentioned by Adhyatma. So that is the amantrak pranayam. So there is only samantrak or amantrak pranayam, otherwise it would be shvasayam. However, refined breath, qualitatively refined breath, qualitatively handled and processed breath, it's going to be all shvasayam. Now, how does the pranayam get mentioned in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, which is the main topic for today's session? So Patanjali says, when the chitta is in dvandva anabhigat condition, therefore when the chitta is in equilibrium, equanimity, the chitta is shanta, saumya, sublime, tender, and settled in tranquil, sublime, sedate, passive, placid condition. Whatever is the breathing, that breathing needs to be handled for regulation. Now, how is this regulation? This regulation is predicated as Bahya Vritti, which is the exhalative pranayam, and in Shastra called Rechaka, or Abhyantara Vritti, which is in breath, or in Shastra or in pranayam it is called Puraka. And then Stambha Vritti, which comes post Rechaka and post Puraka, or pre Puraka and pre Rechaka, in a retentive form called Kumbhaka. That means they are Antarbahya Kumbhaka. After exhalation, Stambha Vritti comes, that is Bahya Vritti. After inhalation, the Stambhanam comes, that is Abhyantara Vritti. That too, these things, that is namely Bahya Vritti, Abhyantara Vritti, Stambha Vritti, now that is regulated in the dimension of desha paridrushtata. That is, in the dimension of location, in the dimension of kala, and in the dimension of sankhya. So desha kala sankhya bhi paridrushtaha. So this is the basis for regulating the breath. It should be bahya vritti or abhyantara vritti or stambha vritti, or bahyabhyantara stambha vritti or abhyantara bahya stambha vritti. That too desha paridrushta or kala paridrushta or sankhya paridrushta or desha sankhya paridrushta, desha kala paridrushta, kala sankhya paridrushta or desha kala sankhya paridrushta. Paridrushta means regulated by these factors. Then that is called pranayam. This is the extensive definition of pranayam that Patanjali gives. Additionally, he mentions the Chaturtha Pranayam as well. The three kinds are Bahya Vritti, Abhyantara Vritti, Stambha Vritti. Stambha Vritti is of two kinds. So, apart from three, there is fourth one, Bahyabhyantara Vishayakshepi. Transcending Bahya Vritti and Abhyantara Vritti, there is a pranayam which is known as Kevala Kumbhaka rather than Sahita Kumbhaka. So that is also pranayam. So this is the extensive definition that Patanjali has given. So try to again recapitulate right from Dvandva Anabhigat Avastha, the breathing during that time, when it is handled in the way suggested, either it is Shvasa or Prashvasa, or more analytically Bahya Vritti, Stambha Vritti, Abhyantara Vritti, and regulated by Desha Paridrushtata, Kala Paridrushtata, Sankhya Paridrushtata, then that is Pranayam. Then it implies that there must be use of either Pranakriya by way of Amantraka scheme or Samantraka scheme. Now that is invariable concomitant factor. Not as the pranayam takes place today by merely regulating the breath of the right nostril or left nostril, or just regulating the breath. It must be samantrak or amantrak. Then only it becomes pranayam. Then he says such pranayam, if you have to conceive the pranayam that Patanjali is putting forward, then it is by the effect of pranayam that he is mentioning. So he says, just the definition that so far considered will not give complete idea of what pranayam is. I gave you extensive definition of it, which circumscribed those sutras. Tasmin tati shvasa prashvasa gatvichedaha pranayamaha सतु बाह्याभ्यंतर स्तंभ वृत्ति देशकार संख्या भी परिदृष्टः दीर्घ सूक्ष्मः बाह्याभ्यंतर विषयाक्षेपिश्च चतुर्थः. So apart from the extensive definition, we have to take into consideration the effect of pranayam that he has mentioned for us to conceive the idea of pranayam. Tatah prakasha varana kshayaha. That gives a major chunk of basis for the data for definition of pranayam. Tatah prakasha varanakshayaha. So, prakasha avaranam, the subjective inner luminosity is veiled by certain clouding factors. So those clouding factors are driven away, and therefore the inner light shines forth. That light which is sought after in spiritual pursuit, that shines forth only when the clouds are driven away. So that is prakasha avaranakshayaha. And then dharana sucha yogyataha manasaha. And the mind becomes qualified and fit for onward sadhana, sanyama sadhana of dharana, dhyan, samadhi. So that gives us a broader perspective of what pranayam is according to Patanjali. So now we will have to decipher this extensive definition that I gave you based on the 4 sutras on pranayam. And that we will be seeing shortly. So we will try to open out the factors. What is Bahya Vritti? What is Abhyantar Vritti? What is Stambha Vritti? What is Desha Paridrushtata? What is Kala Paridrushtata? What is Sankhya Paridrushtata? And what is Dirgha aspect and Sukshma aspect? What is Prakasha Varnakshaya aspect and what is Dharana Suchi Yogyata aspect? So that will help us conceive what pranayam is in a formal educative sense. So in the tradition of yoga, the inhalative process is called purakam and exhalative process is called rechakam. But Patanjali is not taking recourse to these familiar terms which you find in Yoga Shastra, Puraka, Rechaka, Kumbhaka. Patanjali has his own style of describing those because this is a philosophical text and not a technical text. Otherwise, the Yoga Shastra that you find in technical texts, which are technically describing, they mention Purak, Rechak, Kumbhak, Keval Kumbhak. But Patanjali has not mentioned them in the same nomenclature. It is because of the philosophical background and foundation on which the treatise of Patanjali is raised up. But common man mistakes here again inhalation as Purak, exhalation as Rechak. Now that is to be tackled at this juncture. Inhalation is not Purak, exhalation is not Rechak, or retention is not Kumbhak. So Patanjali's concept or Yoga Shastra's concept of Purana Rechana has nothing to do with biological aspects of our embodiment, nor is it Puranam, Rechanam, nutrition and excretion of Pranamaya kosha. Nor it has reference to Antakarana Ghataka called Manas, Buddhi, Ahankara. The Purana Rechana Kumbhana or Puraka Rechaka Kumbhaka, the concepts have bearing with Pranamaya kosha. It is Purana, that is nutrition, to Pranamaya kosha. Rechanam in Pranamaya kosha. The Bahya Antastambhanam also with reference to pranamaya kosha and not annamaya kosha. So all those work on Vasana loci. And they set right the psychological base in human manifestation. There are Shubha Vasanas, there are Heyo Padeya Vasanas, Abhimata Anabhimata Vasanas, Vaikrutika Samskrutika Vasanas. So there has to be addition and deduction in right way. That is why they are referred to as Puraka, that is replenishment or addition or nutrition, and Rechaka is deduction. So there is that arithmetic of Vasana, kosha, that has to be handled, managed, arranged. So there is some kind of plus and minus aspects. That's why it is called Purana Rechana, Puraka Rechaka. So that is plus minus aspect. Something should be subjected to plus and something should be subjected to minusing. And this plusing and minusing is carried out, and therefore it is called Puraka Rechaka. The Kumbhaka comes to do that with a quantum kind of leap. That is by multiplication and division. By multiplication, the numbers increase in a different proportion than by additions. How is the addition taking place? How is the growth of number by addition, and how is the growth of numbers by multiplication? Two plus 5 would become 7, but 2 into 5 would become 35. So where is 7 and where is 35? A quantum leap. So the Antar Kumbhaka comes for something that should be multiplied. Addition won't work, you have to multiply. And Bhajya Kumbhaka works for a grand deduction by way of division. But 10 minus 2 is only 8. But 10 divided by 2 brings a greater reduction. So what is 10 minus 2 and what is 10 divided by 2? So division rapidly grow the deduction rate than minusing process. So for the arithmetic handling in Vasanas, plus, minus, multiplication, division, we have the arrangement of Puraka, Rechaka, Antar Kumbhaka, Bhajya Kumbhaka. So it becomes wholesale rate by Kumbhaka Pranayamas. If Puraka is only adding, Kumbhaka will multiply. If Rechaka is only deducting, the division will give a grand deduction. So, point is the concept of Puraka, Kumbhaka, Rechaka is in accomplished pranayam and not a rudimentary pranayam. So when yogi does inhalation, it becomes Puraka because there are certain nuances, implications, certain skills and certain knacks and certain processes which are not with a common man's practice. So yours and my inhalation is abhyantara vritti, or it is in breath. It is only inhalation. But the yogi's inhalation will be puraka. So when you handle and satisfy all qualifications of pranayamic in-breath and pranayamic out-breath and pranayamic retention, then they become puraka, rechaka, kumbhaka respectively. Merely inhaling doesn't become puraka. Merely exhaling doesn't become rechaka. Merely retaining doesn't become kumbhaka. You must be sufficiently accomplished, qualified and accomplished and empowered. So as an empowered and qualified person, when you inhale, it becomes puraka because you adhere to certain specifications. A novice, neophyte will not be able to adhere to specifications. So it won't become puraka when inhalation is taking place. It won't become rechaka when exhalation is taking place. It won't become kumbhaka when retention is taking place. So that is the broad definition of Bahya Abhyantara Sambhavritti Pranayam, which are threefold or three types, and of course there is fourth one, which is Kevala Kumbhaka. So I will just slightly demystify the Kevala Kumbhaka before we proceed in the topic of Pranayam. The Kevala Kumbhaka, as defined by Patanjali, it is a retention, listen carefully, it is a retention not following and not preceding by in-breath or out-breath. It is a retention which is not preceded by in-breath or out-breath, nor followed by out-breath or in-breath. That's why it is called Kevala Kumbhaka. Kevala. Usually, when we retain breath, there is either a preceding in-breath or out-breath, and there is following either out-breath or in-breath. This is how our retention is characterized. Whereas in Kevala Kumbhaka, there is not even preceding in-breath or out-breath or following in-breath or out-breath. That is why it is called Kevala Kumbhaka, only Kumbhaka. We don't do only Kumbhaka. Either we inhale and then retain, or we exhale and then retain, or we retain and then exhale, or we retain and then inhale. While Bahyabhyantara Vishayakshepi, that is, doing away with either Bahya Vritti or Abhyantara Vritti, either before the Kumbhaka or after the Kumbhaka, that is Kevala Kumbhaka. In Sahita Kumbhaka, you will always find there is inhalation followed by retention, or exhalation followed by retention, or retention followed by inhalation, or retention followed by exhalation. Now this is quite imaginable for normal average IQ. But Patanjali is mentioning something which is quite mysterious, because empirical mind cannot conceive it. A retention neither following preceding by in-breath nor out-breath. This is a very difficult idea to conceive. And that's why Kevala Kumbhaka is said to be mysterious. So, I said we will try to demystify it, and just that we will do today, with which we will end the session for the day. You have to try to understand this not by your thought process but by graphics. Take a piece of paper, a sheet of paper, and graphically depict in breath, retention, out breath, retention, in breath, retention, out breath, retention, in breath, retention, out breath, retention. So see the graphics of it. Now, when the pranayam becomes more and more finer and finer and finer, you will not find the edges, and it will be a serpentine movement, like the movement of serpent. So it will become serpentine movement. So there will be no sharp edges demarcating or demarcating the end of inhalation, beginning of retention, end of retention, beginning of exhalation, end of exhalation, beginning of retention, end of retention and beginning of inhalation. There will be no sharp cuts which your graphics are showing, because the graphics are having two axes. One is time axis and the other one is volume of breath axis. Volume of breath in your lungs. With inhalation, volume goes up. With retention, it stays static. With exhalation, volume goes down. Again with retention, it becomes static. Inhalation, it goes up, rises up. Retention, it is plateau. So you get sharp edges in your graphics. But when it is done smoothly, then it becomes serpentine movement. Now when the serpentine movement becomes further and further subtler. Now in serpentine movement there is something that is going upward and downwards in the graphics. So upward movement indicates inhalation, downward movement indicates exhalation. But then it is smooth and therefore there are no edges between the kumbhaka that comes in between in breath, out breath and out breath, in breath, because it is more serpentine kind of graphics. Now when that becomes more and more subtler and subtler breath, the serpentine movement will slowly become less and less serpentine. Ultimately it will become a straight line. When it becomes straight line, there is no upward movement visible or denoted in the graphics and downward movement denoted in the graphics. So when there are no upward movement and downward movement in the graphics, that means it is bahya abhyantar vishayakshepi, akshepam, done away with, and there is merely a straight line, and the straight line parallel to the time axis denotes kumbhak, and therefore it is kevala kumbhaka. So if you have piece of paper and try to draw what I said, then you will understand how it is kevala kumbhaka. There is no bahya vritti, no abhyantar vritti, because the serpent is lying straight. So that is how kevala kumbhaka takes place, because of rarefied breath, because of rarefied Vasana spanda, rarefied vibrations of Vasana and mind, psyche, consciousness. All pulsating aspects will subside and the breath will not be vibrated, and therefore the breath will be a straight line and not spiking up and down as it happens in graphics of our breathing. So that is a slight attempt to demystify Kevala Kumbhaka. Basically, it is a rarefied breath, gentle, fine, superfine breath. Then it becomes like a straight line. And straight line implies no upward movement, therefore no inhalation, no downward movement, therefore no inhalation, and therefore neither inhalation preceding or following, nor the inhalation exhalation preceding and following. That's why it is Kevala Kumbhaka and it is Yoga Avastha. It is Samadhyavastha. You can't do Pranayam and say I am doing Keval Kumbhaka. You have to be in Samadhi. That means you must be a proficient yogi. Then only Keval Kumbhaka will happen. Anyway, we will now try to open out the factors and decipher the various characteristics mentioned in Pranayam in the sutras of Patanjali. But we will do that next time. Understanding what is Bahya Vritti, what is Abhyantar Vritti, what is Desha Stambha Vritti, what is Desha Paridrushtata, Kala Paridrushtata, Sankhya Paridrushtata, Dirghata and Sukshmata, etc. We will all open out those factors which we did not do today. Now let's see how the implications of these factors are on breath and breathing. Because the breathing is the one which is instrument for pranayam. You can't do away with the breath and say I am doing pranayam. Anyway, that is discussion for next session. Namaskar all of you.